I very much appreciate the opportunity to come and address you. I feel a little bit like President Ford did in 1974 when he was his first year in the White House. It was at Christmas time, and there was a blue spruce that he always referred to when he would talk to people in the White House. And he'd say to people, he said, you know, that blue spruce and I have two things in common this Christmas. We never, first of all, that blue spruce, like me, is from Michigan, and we never expected to spend Christmas in the White House. Well, I never expected to have the delightful opportunity to be here with you today and to address this group. So I appreciate very much the invitation from Gail and from Cindy to be with you. There are several things that I wanted to talk about. Before I introduce my topic, though, I've got to say, I have not been to a group where I've seen 5 hats here. And my hat is off to you. This is delightful. Please tell me, what is the occasion for the 5 hats?
Red hats. Red Hat Society.
The Red Hat Society. Well, then why is yours purple?
Okay, it's our anniversary, 20th
Yes.
anniversary, so we can wear purple all year.
Oh.
And on your birthday month, you also can wear it.
All right. Is this today your birthday?
No.
I thought we were going to have a round of happy birthday. Rats. Oh, okay. Well, I just think it's delightful. When I came into the room, I immediately noticed the hats, and I thought this will be another unique experience. And I'm sure I will never have such an experience again of addressing so many ladies with hats. Well, what is there to say about the election 2008? Now, I know Gail and Cindy have said a little bit about my background to you, and you know, there's so many pundits who've been on CNN and on Fox and on MSNBC and all the networks, the newspapers. We are deluged with information about this election. So I thought what might be helpful to do today is to step a little bit back behind the election itself and what the punditry is all in a whirl about today. Go a little bit into our deeper history. I'm an historian by training, so I tend always to look at the deeper patterns in American life and in elections, and that's what I'd like. If you would like that, that's what I would like to do today, is to go back a little bit deeper and talk a little bit about what's behind the headlines. And I think you'll find that this is a very interesting election in a number of ways. But the first point I want to make about headlines, behind the headlines, is the idea that this election is about change. Ladies, and gentlemen, sorry, all 2 of you, every election is about change. In fact, every election is about the tension between continuity and change. What is it that you want to bring forward from the past, and what is it that you're fed up with and want to change? Every election in American history, every presidential election, has been about that tension, actually, between continuity and change. Second point I want to make behind the headlines. Take a step back and think of the foundational principle of American government. The foundational principle is that, just go back and think of our Constitution, it starts out with 3 words, we the people. We the people. Now think about what that really means. This is what I tell classes at the college level and what I tell high schoolers when I'm a guest lecturer in high schools. We the people have the power constitutionally. What do we do with that power? In our constitutional system of government, we loan that power to our representatives in Washington and in Lansing and in Grand Rapids or East Grand Rapids or whatever our municipality and our county are. We loan that power to them so that they will be our voice in government. But we retain the power, at least in theory. But I have a question for you. How many of you believe today, I mean, you've had a lot of experience living in this country and in politics, voting, watching elections come and go. How many of you feel the power? How many of you? Not one person. Now that's interesting. That gets away from the very change that I think our founders had in mind when they decided to change the system of government from Great Britain to designing a constitutional republic in 1787. The change they wanted is for us to have that power and to exercise it. So the change that we're talking about in 2008 is clearly a very different kind of change from that was spoken of in 1787, where we the people would have the power in 1787 within, of course, the cultural limits of that day. Women didn't have it, slaves didn't have it, but, you know, propertied males did have it. In the limits of their day, that was where the power was, and everybody was supposed to have it. And indeed, the voting rates at the beginning of our country were much higher in the early 1800s, the late 1700s, than they are today. So that's the second point behind the headlines that I would like for you to think about. Let's probe that just a little bit more. What do you think has diminished our power since 1787? What do you think some of the factors are? Let's make this interactive. Just the growth, the fact that there's so many of us. Okay, that's diminished power to some extent because we're part of a larger mass, and yet Congress, if you look at the number of seats in the House of Representatives, for example, it doesn't keep growing, you know, exactly proportionally with the population. There are over 300 million of us now. There are 4 million of us, 6 million of us at the beginning of our country.
The power of lobbyists?
The power of lobbyists is often, if you poll Americans, you find again and again that people blame lobbyists. They have their agenda, they have their special interest, which often runs counter to the general interest. And this was a problem that was anticipated all the way back in the Washington administration. That is a second-rate power. Yes?
Apathy.
Apathy. A lot of people neglect their civic duty. They don't go out and vote. They don't get involved with the issues. That's something I will talk about further as well. Yes, ma'am?
If you say the lobbyists have the power, why do they have it? Because our Congress is allowing it.
Yes, our Congress has created a system in which the lobbyists can exercise the power because of all the perks. Look at all of the regulations, all the laws that now govern the relationship between elected representatives and lobbyists. And metaphorically, you know, K Street in Washington, D.C. is now become a symbol like Madison Avenue or Wall Street or Main Street. Now people speak of the lobbying street in this country, and it's called K Street. Think of that. This would have been unimaginable when you were kids. It would have been unimaginable when you were my age to think that a street would have assumed the importance of a Wall Street, a Main Street, a Madison Avenue. Now we have a street called K Street that puts emphasis on the amount of lobbying that is done in this country. If you actually drive around Washington, though, of course, you know that the lobbying firms aren't just on K Street. They're all over that area. That K Street is not the greatest concentration there. They're a block or two off from K Street, closer, actually, to the Capitol. What would be another source of our diminution of power as Americans? Yes, ma'am?
We've given it to the political parties, and I think that manifested itself in Michigan in the primary this year.
That is a very astute answer. In fact, people rarely recognize the extent to which the political parties may be blamed for taking away power from the people, because people are regarded as the ones, in Washington's mind, back at the beginning of our country, we would certainly have our interests, but we would not have formed parties. Washington warned us not to form parties as a country, because parties then would channel all of our energies into the party and not necessarily into what is in the best interest of the United States. And he wrote a farewell letter in 1796 in which he warned of the power of political parties. If they really get entrenched, and of course you had Jefferson and his faction, and you had Hamilton and his faction back then, and Washington warned that the Hamiltonians and the Jeffersonians would split this country in ways that would hurt the national interest, help their party interest, but hurt the national interest. Now, of course, each of the parties has argued, and sometimes very eloquently, and it's a legitimate argument to have, that the parties simply have a different vision of where our constitutional republic should go. And that in itself does not hurt the national interest.